Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Stand Up. Dropping them every day because I just feel like I should. This one after talking to Michael Cohen on a Sunday morning, I thought was super relevant because he weighed in on some of the most recent controversies that you're hearing and reading about in the news, from Russell Brand, Lauren Boebert, to impeachment, to Attorney General Ken Paxton being acquitted down in Texas, to even a little bit of sports football talk that I was actually legitimately into at the end of our conversation. Michael is one of my favorite thinkers and writers. I definitely do not agree with him all of the time, which is why I like to have him here on the show. I know some of you certainly don't like some of his takes, but he was hard to argue with today because he also weighed in on the controversial issue of NBC hosting, for the first episode of Meet the Press with Kirsten Welker, hosting former disgraced President Donald Trump. What do you think of that? You might think differently after you hear Michael's arguments, but you might agree with Wajahat Ali, who said in several tweets, "Meet the Press, I really hope for the best, but it serves as proof that most corporate media isn't built for this fight against fascism. Not made for this moment, and they just don't have the skill set to take on right-wing authoritarianism and lies. They haven't learned a thing." Then he did give compliments to his friend Mehdi Hassan, also Jonathan Swan, but later on tweeted, "What is gained from interviewing Trump, a man who lies as he breathes? Was it worth it? Sincere question. I'm very curious what other journalists and anchors thought of the train wreck Meet the Press interview with Trump. I'm assuming it's all bad, but professional courtesy dictates they say nothing. Sadly, this is a sneak preview of 2024. And my friend Jared Yates Sexton tweets, like, "After all these years, it's time for people to get understanding how this all works. The media is not there to hold Trump accountable. They're there to profit off the chaos he creates and feeds off of them. Trump and the media battle each other the way Hulk Hogan and Macho Man used to. They go out, throw fake punches while secretly cooperating before going backstage to divvy up the money they hustled from the marks." Yeah, I mean, I don't love that characterization of it, and one could argue that on MSNBC, or rather NBC News, Kirsten Welker might have put Trump, just by having him there and asking him certain questions on the record, in more legal trouble by some of the things that he said. So there's a lot to be said about that. And Michael talks about that and several other things in my conversation with him today. And just quickly on that, last word goes to Meet the Press. NBC Kirsten Welker addressed the criticism at the end of her first episode with Meet the Press with New York Times and NBC News Peter Baker.
Big picture, Peter Baker. I'm giving the final word to you. We have gotten criticism for just sitting down with former President Trump. He is the former president. He's facing 4 indictments as journalists. Just set the scene, the backdrop, why there is still news value and value for the public to hear from him.
Well, this is a huge challenge for American journalism, of course, right? It cannot be that a person can run for president of the United States, be a front runner in his party, and possibly win without ever being challenged by a tough, independent interviewer. And that's, I think, an important part of our system. Now, it obviously is a challenge for us because he is just going to spout out one thing after another, and fact-checking in real time is a real hard thing. But what you've done here is edit it and make sure people understand what's real and what's not.
I cannot thank you all enough.
All right, there you go. So that's Kirsten Welker and Peter Baker on MSNBC, or NBC Meet the Press yesterday. And coming up right now, a contributor to MSNBC, also a writer of his own Substack, which is so good, Truth and Consequences, truthandcons.substack.com. Of course, he's authored 2 really great books, and he's a former speechwriter, worked in the State Department, former Boston Globe columnist, and I love his takes. Even when I don't agree with them, I'm happy to have him to talk about that issue and several more here on a Sunday. Got this done and turned around quickly up for you to listen to late Sunday afternoon if you want, and I plan to post another show later tonight for tomorrow, so look for that. Thanks for listening. Sign up to support on patreon.com/Pete Dominic. And here now, it's the speech boy, Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen, welcome back. Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Pete, it's always good to see you, especially on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, I like to talk to you on Sundays. You're one of my favorite people to talk to on Sundays because there's always a whole bunch of things from the week to discuss that I think are important, and you may have already written about them at some points, or certainly said thoughts about them on social media, which I love, including, I don't know, how important is it, this Lauren Boebert story, or is it just really entertaining and unbelievably ironic and hypocritical based on everything she's said and done?
I mean, the latter. She's a clown. I really could care less. I mean, look, it's just embarrassing and for her, and obviously shows her to be somewhat of a hypocrite. But, am I surprised that she was rude and acted inappropriately at a public event? No. And do I care? Not really. And do I think she's going to get reelected? Probably not. So I don't really care.
Do you think that you think the cameras were an issue? You reacted with surprise that there were infrared or that there were cameras at all in the audience? And I feel like I'm out here alone on an island. Maybe it's because I'm a live performer, but I'm glad those cameras are there.
I don't know. I mean, it just feels kind of weird that something you're doing in a darkened theater ends up being splashed across TV screens. But then again, she's a member of Congress, so she's a public figure. But I don't know. It's a little bit strange like that you can grab your boyfriend's yachts in a theater and it ends up being, broadcast to millions of people around the world. Although you shouldn't be grabbing your boyfriend's yachts, I suppose, in a movie theater.
Right. But I mean, like, if you are doing such a thing, grabbing a yacht, I don't know that I have a yacht, but if it were grabbed, I think that like that would be between me and the person. Like, as long as no one reported it and knew, there would be no reason to put that out there, I suppose. But she got kicked out and they wanted to be,
she did. I mean, that's the thing. And she was very rude about how she got kicked out. So I just think it's pretty disturbing, like her behavior.
Is it ever, can you think, I actually tried to put myself on the spot for this. Is it ever appropriate? Is there a person where the scenario is ever appropriate for that person to say, do you know who I am? Like,
it's never appropriate.
A president, a principal, a teacher, maybe of the chief of police.
Especially if you're acting badly.
Right.
Especially if you're acting badly.
That's usually when it gets rolled out. When you are acting badly. Do you know who I am? Yeah, that's why it's a huge deal that you're being a dick.
That's why it's a huge deal. That's why it's a big story. Exactly.
Okay, so there's that, and I guess we don't have to belabor it based on the fact that you think, her last election.
She already did, didn't she?
Did. I think it's an amazing.
I think they should go see Richard III next.
I feel like.
Thank you.
There was a lot of it. I don't get that necessarily. I don't remember
Richard III. What's Richard? It's come on. Iceman Cometh. Would you prefer that?
Oh, here we go. So. Okay. The other issue that got a lot of attention, maybe saved her a little bit because it might be in the same lane of those of us whose eyes would go to it, which is a lot of people, is the reporting from the Sunday Times in London on Russell Brand and the 4 women who accused him, a couple of rape, one underage. And to me, well, what is your thought about that? And obviously the reaction of many people defending him, including Tucker Carlson and Elon Musk saying, I support Russell Brand.
Okay, I really have no thought. I mean, look. Guy who gives off rapey vibe accused of being a rapey person. Shocked, stunned. I mean, really? Are we surprised by this? Really, this is the least surprising story imaginable. And the fact that, giant asshole Elon Musk is defending him is also not surprising. He's a toddler. He's a child. I mean, it's like he likes Russell Brand for whatever reason. And so he's going to defend him. And anytime you're in agreement with Tucker Carlson, chances are that you are on the wrong side. So I don't really care about any of this. And I'm not surprised by it. It's typical.
I feel like
Musk.
I feel like I care about it more because I don't recall when many of these other men were being called out at kind of the height of the Me Too movement, other prominent people coming to their defense and be like, nope, he did nothing wrong. I think people held their fire in supporting folks. Like, I feel like maybe we've entered a new phase where victims will never report anything because why would I ever do that when there's no possible way that this is going to make a difference and I'm going to get hurt.
But can I just the thing also, look, this isn't even about the facts anymore. It's just about whichever side you're on, right? If it's a conservative accused of it, if it's Brett Kavanaugh, then he didn't do anything wrong. If it's a liberal, like if it's Joe Biden who's accused of it, then obviously it's true.
Right.
And if you read the article, in the Sunday Times, which I did read about Brand. I mean, the evidence is pretty overwhelming that he acted inappropriately. He dated a 16-year-old girl for several months, which her parents somehow allowed for her to do, which I find very surprising. That's a whole other conversation. But he's a gross individual and always kind of has given off the vibe of being a gross individual. So I'm just not at all surprised by this. And he should have been canceled a long time ago for his behavior. So it really isn't really shocking at all.
When did he date a 16-year-old girl?
I forget the timeline on this one, but it was like in 2010, maybe, if I remember correctly from the story. Ooh. But the whole story starts by talking about a 16-year-old girl that he picked up and dated and who he sexually assaulted.
Terrible.
Yeah, pretty awful. Pretty awful. I mean, anybody who does that is pretty gross. And he's pretty gross.
Yeah, I don't think we could belabor it, but I think people get it. That's a pretty awful thing. Let me get your take on Drew Barrymore and Bill Maher crossing the picket line with their television shows. Are they different? Do you have different reactions for both?
No, I saw Drew Barrymore backtrack this morning and is now saying she's not going to do her show. But Bill Maher, another person, again, has a sort of, I wouldn't say, not the same vibe of a brand. He's more of an asshole brand vibe. Prick vibe, I think is Bill Maher's thing. So he's going to be a prick to the writers and the union. Again, stunned, shocked, amazed that this is happening.
Another person that I want you to weigh in on, and I haven't seen you weigh in.
The thing is, but can I say one more thing? I think it's funny about all the people you've mentioned. They're all who we think they are.
I have another one.
Okay, one more.
Jan Wenner, the Rolling Stone co-founder.
Perfect. Yeah, exactly. That interview is the craziest interview I've not ever read, but it's in the top 20.
All right, let's just set it up. Set it up for people. Co-founder of Rolling Stone magazine. Am I saying his name right? Jan?
I think it's Jan Wenner.
Jan Wenner has been removed from the board of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Foundation's board just a day after a New York Times interview was published in which, in response to outrage over the lack of diversity in his book, he offered a defense that was itself the subject of even greater anger and controversy. He apparently said, the Rolling Stone co-founder interviewed and spoke over the years with music legends such as Jerry Garcia, Mick Jagger, and others. His new book includes some of those conversations, 7 altogether, all white men. The fact that no women and no black artists were included became a subject of controversy, of course. He was asked about it. And regarding women, Jan Wenner said, just none of them were as articulate enough on this intellectual level, and remarked that Joni Mitchell was not a philosopher of rock and roll. His answer about artists of color was less direct. Of black artists, Stevie Wonder, genius, right? He said, I suppose when you use a word as broad as masters, the fault is using that word. Maybe Marvin Gaye or Curtis Mayfield. I mean, they just didn't articulate at that level. So those are the comments, just out of context, but go ahead.
He said women are not articulate and black musicians are not articulate. That's what he said. Actually, everyone's missing the single best, most amazing quote in that interview, in which he gets asked about the Virginia Tech story. If you remember this is the story of a woman who lied about sexual assault at a fraternity house. And it was a big story when it came out. Then there was a lot of scrutiny of it. Turns out that it was not true. And he said, the quote where he says, except for the part about the fabricated rape, the story was bulletproof. I swear to God, he said that. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable quote. Because the reporter asked him, did you learn anything from this incident, this extraordinary act of journalistic malfeasance? And his response was, the story was bulletproof, except for the fabricated rape. Which
right.
Was
and in that case,
story.
You said a journalist was found guilty over a false story. If you said that, in the story that Michael's obviously referring to.
Yeah, the story was wrong.
He was the editor.
Wrong. Yeah. Rolling Stone screwed up big time.
Except the false. Oh, wow. That is crazy. I didn't hear about that. I didn't read that article. I knew you'd know about him because you're a big music guy, and I figured you.
Well, I read the interview on Friday, and I just was like, wow, this is going to leave a mark. But again, like I said earlier, everybody that we've mentioned here, they are who we thought they were, which is just sort of bad people, some worse than others. I mean, Russell Brand is worse than Jan Wenner, I suppose. I mean, definitely, because he committed sexual assault. But these are people that this is what we should expect from them.
Speaking of people who have definitely committed sexual assault, Donald Trump was hosted on NBC's prime political news Sunday show, Meet the Press. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press now, with Kirsten Welker hosting for Chuck Todd, who was highly criticized throughout his tenure as the host there for any number of different things. And everybody's losing their mind about Meet the Press, Kirsten Welker, having him on. I've always said, if you have him on, you can't have him on live. That's the one rule, because he can lie and you can't fact check it. But you can choose what to put up there, I suppose. I texted you yesterday because I hadn't seen your reaction to it. I was like, what do you think of this? And maybe you were busy, but you're like, I don't think of it. I don't care.
I don't care. And I'm going to be very honest with you. And this is going to be a hard thing I'm going to say right now. So I hope that your listeners are prepared for it. I don't care. You shouldn't care. If you care a lot, I cannot say this I cannot say this more clearly. Go touch grass. I beg of you, go touch grass. This is not an important story. Okay. We are 14 months away from an election. Donald Trump is the almost certain Republican nominee for president. He's going to get interviewed. He's going to say things that are untrue. This is how it goes. There's no proper way to fact check him in real time. As far as I can tell, NBC fact checked him after the fact. But at the end of the day, none of this is going to matter. And none of it. And I know there are people out there who have a vested interest in telling you that the press is screwing up and they're making the same mistakes they made in 2016 and blah, 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 blah. It's just not true. And it doesn't matter. Well, and none of what happens 14 months before an election ultimately matters for that election. So stop.
So then I believe that you've been somewhat consistent on this even back in 2016. There's a narrative that the media created Donald Trump by paying so much attention to him, by platforming him, by not asking him tough questions. And you don't buy that. You didn't buy that then so much, or you don't now? Explain a little nuance of the media's role and why you're giving them such a pass.
I don't want to get into the 2016 debate so much because it's such a fractured conversation, and that's such a emotional conversation. I mean, I don't really buy this argument, but it's a secondary issue to my mind. It's happening now. I'm going to tell a story. Okay,
sure.
Back in 2015, I wrote a column for the Boston Globe when I was a columnist there that was headlined "Donald Trump is a liar." This was November 2015. And it was based on the fact that he kept telling people that after 9/11, that there were groups of Muslims in Jersey City, New Jersey, who were celebrating, which wasn't true.
Right.
And I gave this to my editor, and she said, "You can't say he's a liar. We don't say that. We can't get inside somebody's head." I said, "Okay, but he said this. It was fact checked. Point out to him that it's not true, and he's still saying it. So I think we can say that he's lying." And she was convinced by my argument, and we published the article, "Donald Trump's a liar." The time was kind of a big deal because, again, which just wasn't something that as journalists, most newspapers would do. Now, it's hard to find a single story in the media that doesn't call Donald Trump a liar. And I'm being serious.
Yeah.
It's really hard to find ones that don't say he's not telling the truth, or he's a liar, or he's dishonest, or he's spreading falsehoods, what have you. And so the idea that the press has learned nothing how to cover Trump or hasn't evolved how they cover Trump is just, it's bizarre and it's silly. And it doesn't really add up to the reality of how Trump is covered. And so, as far as I'm concerned, this idea that because Kristen Welker didn't ask a follow-up question and let Trump tell a lie, suddenly the republic is going to fall, it's become this sort of belief system on the left that somehow this matters to voters' decision-making when we know it doesn't really matter. And we know that most people don't watch these interviews. And it's become like an article of faith. And I think it's incredibly foolish and dangerous in that it undermines people's confidence in the media. And to back to the point, it's foolish because it's not true, right? Are literally hundreds, if not thousands of stories that have been written about Donald Trump's lies and his falsehoods. Okay. There have been thousands of stories written about January 6th, hundreds of stories written about his indictments, all of which are almost uniformly negative. But these liberal press critics will come up with, and I'm criticizing liberals here because it's generally liberals who do this. They will come and say, "Oh, look at this. This headline was both sidesy, or this headline didn't criticize, or this wasn't." It doesn't matter. And it's also, you're taking little anecdotes and treating them as though it's data when it's not. So at the end of the day, I just think that this story has become an excuse for liberals to bash the press. And I think the people who are encouraging it, the people, you find them on Twitter, this is all they do is they bash the media for some, comma misplaced or a headline they don't like. Then they end up undermining confidence in the media in general. And I don't think it's really helpful for the left and helpful for having a functioning democracy. So that's just my view on this.
I think that's a pretty well thought out point of view. I might disagree with something here or there, but I don't even want to belabor it because I mostly agree. The only thing I do want to ask you simply is, what do you say to people? And I think I know the answer. what do you say to people who say they just shouldn't have him on their programs? Like Ali Velshi said on this show to me, editorially, he won't have election denier Republican congressmen on his show unless they're coming on to say, recant their election denial. Why should you host this man on your platform? What do you say?
Donald Trump. Why should you host Donald Trump? I don't know, because 74 million Americans voted for him in 2020, and probably that many will vote for him again in 2024. I mean, he's the Republican nominee. He's going to be the Republican nominee for president. He's leading the polls by 40, 50 points. I mean, are you saying we should ignore him? I don't know what world people live in where you can somehow ignore this. And here's the thing also, and this is what makes me the crazy about this. The more you put Trump on TV, the less popular he is. I mean, if there's any takeaway from what's happened over the past, 6, 7 years in American politics, is the more people have seen Trump, the less they've liked him. And I think the other thing that makes me crazy about this argument is that the idea that any of this matters, right? How many people are going to watch Meet the Press? A couple million, maybe?
Well, people will watch I don't love that argument because people will watch the clips many, many times. So.
And you know what's going to happen? They're going to form an opinion about that clip based on what they think of Donald Trump already.
Right. Well, there is one thing.
So if you look at if you look at like the approval ratings since January of 2021 and today about Trump, they're basically unchanged. People have an opinion about Trump and they've made up their minds about him for the most part. There's a small sliver, I suppose, that haven't. Those people are not watching Meet the Press. The ones who don't have an opinion about Donald Trump. People who watch Meet the Press, they either don't like him or they do like him. So the idea this is changing voters' minds is just this bizarre power given to the political media that doesn't actually exist. And I'm a political reporter, so I hate to say that, but it's true. Most of what we do is just catering to people who already share my views. I'm not influencing people to change their mind, and most reporters are not.
That's not why I subscribe to your Substack. I like to read your stuff because I often disagree with you, and in addition, I don't like you.
Oh, well, okay, that's true. Okay, there are people who do hate read me. That is true.
Right.
Sure.
So, but on the NBC Meet the Press Kirsten Welker thing, one might argue, and they probably did, and I didn't see the legal eagles on Twitter or elsewhere talking about this, but like you could argue if you have him on and you ask him a certain question, it could be exactly what Jack Smith needs on the record. Like he did say things that I think his lawyers are going to have to deal with, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm sure I think he's probably walked himself into more legal trouble by being on these shows. He shouldn't be talking at all about this stuff.
Yeah.
Any smart person who's been charged with 91 counts of illegality would not talk about it publicly. But of course, Donald Trump's not a smart person, so he does it all the time.
Well, much of what we talked about today, you actually haven't written that much about, because a lot of these things I'm just getting your reactions on things that happened in the last 48 hours. So just before I let you go, I do want to ask you about your latest, and I think one of the more important pieces and issues to be talking about, which is impeachment. Republicans opened an impeachment inquiry against President Biden last week, even though they have no evidence he's done anything wrong, you say, on a post at truthandcons.substack.com titled, "Those Old Impeachment Blues." Give us a little bit of a summary of this case as we head into what is sure to be a long investigation. And also, obviously, Hunter Biden now has been indicted on those gun charges. So more proof that Joe Biden is using his Justice Department to weaponize against not only his opponents, but his son.
Yeah, I mean, that Joe Biden, talk about son of a bitch. Jesus Christ, right? I mean, after his own son.
Going after his son?
I mean, good Lord. It's pretty harsh.
Crazy.
No, look, I think this impeachment story is kind of a non-story, to be honest. I don't think it's going to go anywhere because there's not going to, if there's a vote on an impeachment inquiry in the House, it's going to fail. There's not enough Republicans to support it. I mean, you already had Ken Buck, who's a pretty conservative MAGA Republican from Colorado, basically do an op-ed for the Washington Post yesterday saying this is a ridiculous notion of it.
I didn't know he did an op-ed. Okay.
Yeah, he's been very vocal against it. And I think, there's a reason, for example, here's McCarthy back on, I think, September 1st, gave an interview in which he said he wouldn't support an impeachment inquiry unless the entire House voted for it. And then 12 days later, he just did a complete 180 and actually announced it himself without a vote. Right. Doesn't have the votes. And this is a payoff to the far right. I think it's a non-story because there's no evidence that Joe Biden There's not anything that's worthy of being impeached for. And I think also, it probably helps Biden more than it hurts him, because I think it just exposes sort of the craziness of the Republicans. Which
I
is,
wonder about that. That was my big initial question. Does this, and people looked at past impeachments and so on, does this help Biden or does it hurt Biden is a question.
Well, so I had a column this week in MSNBC about this issue where people have been saying that Biden is very weak and Biden should drop out, and that, maybe he should dump Kamala Harris as his vice president. And my response to this is that people again need to touch grass. It's sorry to keep using that expression, but they really do. We are 14 months away from an election, and the best thing going for Joe Biden is that he is facing off against a very extreme Republican Party. And we see that with Trump, and we've seen the backlash of Trump in really 3 straight elections, both midterms in 2020, but also the extremism of Republicans in the House trying to impeach him, I think only sort of strengthens the argument that, strengthens the resolve of Democrats to vote for Biden, even if they don't like Biden, right? I think, it's important to understand this. Like, we live in an era where negative partisanship reigns supreme. When I say negative partisanship, what I mean is it's not so much that you're a partisan for one party or the other. It's that you're a partisan against the other party, right? You're voting for Democrats because you don't like Republicans, or you're voting Republicans because you don't like Democrats. And I just think that is the biggest factor in Biden's favor. And it's one of the reasons why I don't take this impeachment thing too seriously. I think it's actually probably a net negative for Republicans to do this. I think it'll be a backlash against them. Just as, by the way, I think the more people see Trump in interviews, the better it is for Biden.
Right.
But I'll tell you something. This is the funny thing about this, that liberals are like, oh, we shouldn't be platforming. We should be normalizing Trump. It's a little too late for that. But frankly, the more people see Trump and the more this election becomes a referendum on Trump, the better it is for Biden, right? If I'm in the White House right now, I don't want a referendum on Joe Biden. I want a referendum on Donald Trump, because that's how I get reelected.
I think there's one story that I do think you might think is a bigger deal, because a lot of these things I've been asking you've been dismissing them. And I think mostly I agree with it, which is why I love having your perspective here, because we're blowing a lot of things up and we panic a lot. And you, in one of your recent posts, were like, you wrote a sentence, I think, that you couldn't write at the Boston Globe, which is why I love being a subscriber. You write, calm the fuck down. But this one, I think, is bigger. I think, and I don't know that you've had a lot of time to digest it. So the story out of Texas, where the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, has now been acquitted on impeachment articles over bribery and corruption. Of course, folks following this story already know, probably the details, but the guy is the Attorney General of Texas. Has been controversial for a very long time. Republicans there voted to impeach him, and somehow he was acquitted. He got enough votes in the Senate. He's now been acquitted. I feel like this, you might think, is a bigger deal.
It is a big deal. Yes, it's a big deal, because you have an openly corrupt public official basically being protected by his political allies. It's gross what happened in Texas. And although I'm not surprised, because Texas is basically a one-party state in which Republicans dominate and Republicans, do whatever the hell they want. You see this in Wisconsin, to some extent also, where they're trying to impeach the Supreme Court justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court, because she might change the gerrymandered assembly districts and weaken Republican power. I mean, this is not democracy, right? This is just political partisanship dictating, all. And what's crazy about the Texas story, what really is sort of fascinating, is the House Republicans in Texas are the ones who impeached him.
Right.
They're the ones who pushed the case. Yep. So you have this huge divide from the Republican Party in Texas between people who actually believe in the rule of law and those who do not. And I'm sort of curious to see how that plays itself out over the next couple of months. But, here's the thing. I'm not surprised by any of this anymore. I mean, in red states, so I used this analogy recently about Wisconsin versus Tennessee. Wisconsin, they're talking about impeaching the Supreme Court justice. I'm kind of skeptical they're actually going to do it.
Good.
For a variety of reasons. But one is that I'm not sure they can do it in a way that is bulletproof. But also, because Wisconsin is a purple state, and it is a dangerous move to basically thumb your nose so gratuitously at the voters. But in a red state, you can do that without any problem whatsoever. In Tennessee, they threw out those 3 Democratic members of the assembly, the legislature.
Yeah.
And they got voted back in. And
right.
They're not going to pay any price for that. And in Texas, they won't pay any price for it either. So this is what you have in these sort of one-party states where, and not so much in blue states, but in red states, where basically Republicans run the show. They get to make the decision about things, and they run the place like it's a political protection racket, not like it's an actual, state government.
All right, Michael Cohen, so good on a Sunday to get to talk to you about all these things. Do you want to say anything in closing about football or 9/11 or anything else that you've been talking or thinking about that I didn't ask you?
Well, the most important story this Sunday is the Lions, Detroit Lions, playing at home against the Seahawks.
And we are out of time.
Chance for them to go 2-0. Very exciting. By the way, on a totally unrelated note, I was up till 2 a.m. last night watching the Colorado State game. That was an awesome football game. Deion Sanders, call me a believer at this point. That was an incredible comeback. What can I say? College football, baby.
I didn't know the game was on. It was late at night. I'd come back from friends. I didn't know it was on. I looked and saw Colorado was playing Colorado State. Of course, I love that. Of course, I love that storyline. I turn it on. Colorado State is winning, and I'm like, oh, they're going to lose. I turn it off. I woke up this morning and saw your tweet, and I was like, what is he talking about? And then I go on, double overtime, and spoiler alert, Deion Sanders, Colorado Buffaloes won against Colorado State, and it is, even if you're not a sports fan, if you like football just a little bit, you can't turn away from the storyline here. It was a fantastic, I watched the beginning of it. I was playing. Out. Yeah. I was out. I came home at like midnight. It was still going on. And it went on until 2 a.m. It was like it was a crazy long game. This is the most and it was a very exciting game. Ever talked about sports, but I'm such a kind of casual watcher of sports that I see things unravel in real time. So like last week I found out, okay, so Deion Sanders is the coach. I knew all about that, and he left the controversy there, leaving a historically black university. But he's the coach now of Colorado. Okay, and his son is the star. He's like a really legit, might be the best college quarterback. And so I can't believe this, that his son is that good. And he brought him. And then last night I'm watching it. And then last night I'm watching it, and I see another guy with the last name Sanders returns an interception for a touchdown. And I go, his son he has another son on the team, and they're winning the game. No, it was pretty insane. I love football. I couldn't be happier that football is back. I basically blocked out I'm going to see actually Willie Nelson tonight. I'm very excited about that. I've never seen him before. He's 90 years old. So this is kind of fun. But I blocked out my entire basically 1 to 4 today so I could watch the Lions, because I am the Lions bandwagon is here, and I encourage all of you to get on board. Nobody cares. No one's going to get on it except you're going to Vegas, baby. Nope. This is the year. Is that where this is the year? Is that where the Super Bowl is? Yeah, it is. All right. Well, good luck. Go to Vegas anyway, because it's fun to go to Vegas. I'll just root for them for you, and that's all I care about is you. You're happy. You might have been a Jets fan. Pete. I was a Jets fan my whole life until they drafted Aaron Rodgers, and I became a Bills fan, and then the Jets won in the most exciting win of my life when I was rooting against them. I want to just tell you for the record, a good friend of mine said, I said, you're going to watch the game on Monday, the game. And he's like, I'm only going to watch it so that in the hopes that Aaron Rodgers has a crushing injury and is out for the season. And sure enough, that's what happened. Unbelievable. Another great storyline. Michael, have a great day. Have a great time at Willie Nelson. And thank you. Thank you. Talk to you later. All right, there you go. Michael Cohen, what did you think? Where did you agree? Where did you disagree? Let him know on Twitter and at truthandcons.substack.com, where you should subscribe right now. And I'll get him on to join us in a hangout. If anybody wants to yell at him and argue with him, he's a great guy and a good friend. I'm always happy when he joins us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. If you listen to this on Sunday or wherever and whenever you're listening to it, I hope that you are finding joy, light, and happiness and avoiding the dark. And you're alive. Hey, that's good. So a lot of other profound things that I could say, but I think I'm just going to wrap it up. Love you guys. Bye-bye. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us
keep right on.